Good morning, Kahal Kadosh. Beruchim Abaim to everyone. Today, Tuesday, the 23rd day of Shevat, corresponding to the 14th day of February. Today's special breakfast and class, graciously sponsored by the Shama family, the Ilui Nishmat, the beloved mother, Batya, Bat Farida, Aleha Shalom. Additionally, today's class, dedicated by Mark Graceman, the Ilui Nishmat, his father, Eliezer Ben Beracha Esther, Vechaim Abraham Yehuda, Alav Shalom. Additionally, today's class sponsored by Elias Perez, the Ilui Nishmat, L'Refuah Shelema HaMavdil, his father-in-law, Shmuel Ben Bahie. May HaKadosh Baruch Hu give him Refuah Shelema among the Cholim of Am Israel, and may all the Neshamot have an aliyah in Gan Eden. Amen. Amen. I received a very interesting article yesterday discussing with the world today commemorates, which I'm not sure if I'm able to say this in a Torah class, but the world knows that on the 14th of February there is like a tradition in America when it comes to Valentine's Day. Right. All right? We're not going to dwell too much about it, but you see advertisement, you see flowers, you see chocolates, you see a lot of things, and you need to know from the get-go that this day was established as a commemoration of the killing of Jewish people.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. Thousands of Jewish people were murdered based on this particular Gentile that happened to be named the way we are mentioning. He was appointed to be a priest, and he was appointed to execute marriages when the church will not allow them to happen. So I have all the records, I have all the information, all the biographical or historical background of this particular day. So I'm saying to the Kahal that we need to be careful when things apparently may be innocent or loving and caring the way the portraying of this day is shown to the world. It really is a dark chapter in Jewish history. This happened several hundred years ago, I believe prior to the Inquisition. I do have all the information available. An historian shared with me this information with a lot of legal and governmental documents stipulating the brief summary that I just mentioned. So I strongly urge the Kahal, if someone wanted to celebrate this day is not a day to celebrate, but completely the opposite. And the truth of the matter is, from the Jewish perspective, we don't need to have a special day to show the love and affection and caring and concern for our spouses. Actually, every day is something that we need to do from many elements of the Torah. Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam She'akol Nihiyah V'Baruch. Amen.
So why they call it Valentine?
Because the gentleman in charge of activating the decree against the Jewish people was a priest called Valentine. Yes. Okay, Rabotai, don't get carried away. I just felt the obligation to share this with the Kahal because the world is making a lot of noise about this particular day of celebration. Okay, Kahal Kadosh. We welcome everyone that is here.
Sharon.
There are chairs for ladies set up right there. So ladies, you can have a seat there, please. Thank you so much. Just a friendly reminder that these classes are being recorded live, and the video camera is on, and the microphone is on. That means if you like to speak, please do it outside of the room. So we left, since we are in the final week of the Moed Kol Hai and the time of the Shovavim, the Zohar Kadosh discusses a couple of messages to reinforce this holy topic. So it says the Rabbi Haim Falaji Izaher mi berit alashon. Be careful in the way that you speak. Yesterday, in the English class for ladies, we learned from the Pirkei Avot a very interesting Mishnah that discusses how important is that a person should not criticize when nothing was asked from them. What does it mean? Sometimes the way people talk, they talk in a very dismissive manner. Or sometimes they make comments which are not positive, but actually are negative. And the Mishnah in Pirkei Avot says, no one appointed you to be the sheriff of the world, and no one asked you your opinion to be given in a negative way. And I illustrated a couple of examples. Let's say you went to a wedding or to a bar mitzvah, right? And they ask you, how was the farah? How was the wedding, etc. And you say, the music was too loud. The food came too late. The flowers were not too nice. I ask you a question. Did someone ask you any of the above? No. They ask you a simple question. How was the wedding? What should have been your answer? Beautiful. Beautiful. I'm so happy for them, etc. So the Mishnah summarizes and says, don't be the one who always brings out criticism and negative comments, because every person has a moment to shine and every situation has a moment to flourish. The Sefer Hasidim writes that a person should always aim and attempt to be peaceful with everyone, which is something that we know, is something that the Torah promotes on a constant basis, something that the Mishnah in Pirkei Avot mentions, like Aharon HaKohen, Ohev Shalom, Berodef Shalom, the importance of loving peace and pursuing peace. But there is in a statement in Sefer Hasidim that says that if with a Jew, with Jewish people, the Torah is telling you to be proper and respectful, more and more and more, he says, with Goim. Don't think because a person happens to be a Gentile that automatically it's a person that you can criticize and scream at. It says Sefer Hasidim, the problem with the Goim is worse than with a Jew. Why? Shetinatam shemura le'olam. It says, if a Jew has an issue with another Jew, how do we solve it? We solve it among ourselves. That's why there is a halakha that says that if there is a financial dispute between Jewish people, you don't go to court. First, you try to settle it among yourselves. Then you go to the rabbi. And if that doesn't work, you go to the bedin. And if that doesn't work, then you go to the judicial court system. Why do you have to go to all these steps before to go into the judicial court system? Because when two Jewish people go to the judicial court system, even though they are going to settle a case, but there is an element of Hilul Hashem, of desecrating God's names. Why? Because we are airing our dirty laundry in front of the world. Even though the halakha will allow us to go to the court in certain cases, but that's not our first option. That is our last option after you got rabbinical approval to go to the court. Why? Because among us, among brothers, among family, we should settle our matters in-house and not outside of the house. So comes Rabbi Chaim Palachi, the Moed Kol Chai, and it says, do you want to minimize problems in your life? Do you want to live a happy life? Do you want to live a peaceful life? And who doesn't want to live a happy life? Everyone. Who doesn't want to have a peaceful life? Everyone. But sometimes, guess what? Says Rabbi Chaim Palachi, we may be our own enemies in our lives. The same way that say, the biggest fear is fear itself. Rabbi Haim Falachi says the worst enemy of the person is the person themselves. Obviously, let's clarify. We are not saying there could be a specific matters or situations that others are influencing our life in an adverse manner. But you know what the Moed Kol Chai says? If a person will be more careful in the way they speak to one another, believe me, he says, the life of mankind will be more harmonious, more loving, and more peaceful. Which I believe that we all agree. Why? There is a pasuk, very famous pasuk that says, "Ahaim behamavet beyad halashon." It says, life and death is through the tongue of the person. And I'm going to keep it short. That the message of that pasuk, Shlomo HaMelech says, that if the person will be thoughtful before they speak, they will be more careful, they will say more productive things. How many times it happens when I'm giving the class and then a thought comes to my mind and I say often, I'm not sure if I should say this publicly. Now, why do I say this? I'm not afraid of saying what needs to be said. But if you're not here and you see the room and you're part of the class, sometimes you don't understand really what I'm attempting to say. Another one, God forbid, someone remotely that is listening to a Torah class and gets the wrong message. So comes to me, Haim Palachi, and it says, how do I start to be more makpid, to be more meticulous in the way I speak? So the easiest answer will be what? Think before you speak. That's easier said than done. That's easier said than done. But he gives a formula. It says, first of all, let's bring David HaMelech, alav shalom, to the picture. David HaMelech says in the book of Tehillim, Eshmera derachai mechato bilshoni. In English it means, Eshmera derachai, I will watch my behavior, my ways. Derachai means my ways, my behavior. Mechato, from sinning. Bilshoni, with my tongue. I ask you a question. Do we have a fear that David HaMelech will not be careful in the way that he spoke? For sure not. There is another pasuk that says, David HaMelech, Bon akebai yesubenni. What is the meaning of this verse? David HaMelech says, I'm not afraid of the big transgressions, the big sins of the Torah. I'm afraid of the small ones. Avon, sins. Akevai, my heels. Yesubeni, surrounding. Rashi writes in Perashat Ekev, Behaya Ekev Tishme'un, Mizvot, Sheha Dash Be'akavav. It says the pasuk, be careful with the mizvot that we step upon them. Now, what does it mean, a mizvah that you step upon them? Short answer, there's easy mizvot. The big mizvot, everybody knows. I don't work on Shabbat, I fast in Yom Kippur, I listen to the shofar in Rosh Hashanah, I do Megillah in Purim, Hanukkah in Hanukkah. But he brings a few examples and he asks, how good are our berachot? Is a good question, don't answer it. What does it mean, how good are our berachot? Basically, how do we make sure that when I say a beracha, I don't miss anything? The berachot have 9 words. Berachot of food, with the exception of bread, they all have 9 words. Do the number. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam boreh mineh mezonot. 9 words. One beracha that has 10 words is hamotzi lechem min haaretz. So he says the following: Shelo ledaleg bebirchotav. Make sure when you recite the berachot, don't skip even one word. One word, because one word skipped in the beracha makes the beracha incomplete. That's why whenever I announce at the synagogue, Rabbi, Baruch haba, Shalom Aleichem.
I got it.
No, you know what? Bring another chair next to me. Don't leave.
I got it, Rabbi. Take it up.
Good here.
Okay, the rabbi found a seat. That's it.
This morning the rabbi wasn't here and he wanted to learn something because I said it's about Torah. I didn't sit here.
Beautiful. L'chaim. Would like to acknowledge the presence of my dear friend, Rabbi Yosef Biton from Lakewood, New Jersey. He has a factory of Sephardic Hachamim. He has magnificent kolelim that eventually from this Sephardic kolel in the city of Lakewood creates wonderful Sephardic rabbis, teachers, and great community leaders as well. So welcome to sunny Florida. So it's mentioned in the name of Rabbi Yehuda Sadka alav shalom that he says from Puede Yosef that a person should always train themselves when the beracha is mentioned to say the beracha with a comma, meaning to say, like you write a sentence and you put sometimes the comma, you put the colon, semicolon. There are lots of grammars when you write. When you say a beracha, he says, also add your own grammar rules. Which are the grammar rules for a beracha? Baruch ata Hashem, comma. Elokeinu melech haolam, comma. And the beracha that you need to say. And that's what I always say for whoever is going to say the beracha of the gomel for the kahal. I always say it. Say it loud, clear, and slow. Why do I say this? Because many times people go up to the sefer, or many times people go up to the sefer to say the beracha of the gomel, and you hear the way they are saying it, and gives you the impression that they are actually missing words. So interesting enough, that what does he say? That if you want to start exercising how to control the tongue, which the tongue has a direct connection to the way that a person speaks, and the way that a person speaks has a direct connection to the way of the topic of the Shovavim, it says, number one, be careful in your recite the berachot. Another example, he says, Lo yeh noder ve'eno mekayem. It says the topic of promises. A person from the Torah is allowed to make promises. From the mitzvah, from the Torah, the pasuk says, Ish kitidor neder laHashem, a person that will make a promise, lo te'acher leshalemo. You made a neder, you need to deliver on it immediately. Mosa sefatecha tishmor be'asita. Whatever you committed to do, do it. In other words, if you make a neder, you must do it. You know what his suggestion is? Number one, that if you're going to make a neder, you need to keep it. But you know what will be my suggestion? Don't make a neder. Don't make promises. Beli neder is better. Why? Remember before Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, 40 days before Rosh Hashanah, we make Hatarat Nedarim. We make the prayer to nullify vows and promises. And what does it say there? That the Zohar Kadosh writes that if a person made a promise and for 40 days that promise was not kept, the tefillot of this person are on hold. That's why, listen to this. Neder, nidui, nida, they all have the same root. Neder means a promise. Nida means the state of the wife when she goes through the monthly cycle. And then you have nidui. What's the meaning of nidui? Nidui is like an isolation. That's the meaning of nidui. Let's say someone that was afflicted by leprosy, Sara, God forbid, for speaking Lashon Hara. He sent out of the field, מחוץ למחנה, 7 days. That action of outcasting someone from the community and send them to live in isolation, that's called nidui. That is the same root word as nether. Nidui, nether. And the Zohar Kadosh writes that one of the reasons why we do it specifically 40 days is in the event that we have unkept promises. Those unkept promises should not block our prayers of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Imagine yourself, you prayed beautifully Rosh Hashanah and Kippur, you bought aliyot, you made all the prayers, and yet suddenly whatever you prayed for is stuck in traffic. It's not moving. The system is down. How do you achieve that? Short answer, by making promises and not keeping them. So number one, don't promise. If you need to make a promise, make sure that you're able to keep it. Because if you don't, you must do hatarat nedarim. You must convene a 3-man bedin, and you have to ask permission to nullify that promise that you made. It's not very common, but occasionally throughout the year, we do this. You know that in Israel, there is a tradition to make hatarat nedarim every Friday. And in some communities, they do it Friday afternoon, in order not to enter the Shabbat with promises that were made and were not kept. Number one. Number two, it says here the concept of happiness. You may ask yourself, what has to do happiness with the way that we speak? What has to do happiness with the period that we are learning? The period for the audience that we are learning in these weeks is the topic of the Shovavim. The topic of the Shovavim is a fundamental spiritual period in the life of mankind. In the ladies' department, it refers to the topic of family purity. In the men's department, refers to the topic of personal holiness through the behavior of the man with his Berit Milah. And it says that happiness, it's a magnet to attract godliness and blessing to the person. Sadness is the opposite. I mentioned yesterday in Megillat Esther, from today we are 3 weeks to Purim. And one of the highlights of Purim is obviously Megillat Esther. And we find 2 parts of the Megillat Esther. The first half is all about the drama and the threat against the Jewish people. The second part of the Megillah is all about the success and the survival of the Jewish people. Megillat Esther has 9 chapters, plus 10. The 10th chapter is 1 or 2 verses, very long. Why the length of Megillat Esther? Couldn't be that in the beginning of the threat, Mordechai and Esther step up to the plate, they do what they do, and we have the happy ending of the Megillah. We all know that that didn't happen. It actually, Megillat Esther was an event that lasted almost a year. Megillat Esther lasted 11 months, give or take. Why so long? I'm going to tell you an answer that I read discussing the difference between Ahashverosh and Haman in the beginning of the Megillah and the second half of the Megillah. Now you are surprised. What has to do Haman and Ahashverosh? Why don't we speak about Mordechai and Esther? We're going to speak about Mordechai and Esther some other time. But let's discuss a moment the mindset of Haman and Ahashverosh in the beginning of the Megillah and towards the second half of the Megillah. In the beginning of the Megillah, the mindset of Adam, of Mehila, of Haman and Ahashverosh was a very happy mindset. They were happy. Haman was happy because he was given permission to execute the Jewish people. Ahashverosh was happy because Haman promised him to pay an exorbitant amount of money. So both of them were happy. As long as they were happy, they had extra godly protection. I know that it's strange to say this, but it's an unbelievable concept. The second half of the Megillah, the Pasuk tells us that Ahashverosh was unable to sleep. That night, Ahashverosh was not able to sleep. What happens if you were not able to sleep the night before? How do you wake up in the morning? Tired, exhausted, your mind is not there. That's what happened with Ahashverosh. That night he couldn't sleep. Then happened the threat of Haman. And then the threat that Haman built something to hang Mordechai. And then Ahashverosh telling Haman, take whatever you told me about my feelings about Mordechai, dress him with the royal garments, carrying him around town, put him the same garments that I wore when I became a king, and say, Kacha ya'aseh la'ish asher hamelech hafez bikaro. This shall be done to the man that the king wishes to honor. What do you think? Haman was happy when that took place?
No.
There is a midrash that says that when he wasn't happy at all, Haman wasn't happy. Haman was walking facing down. That now suddenly he needs to serve Mordechai. So one midrash says that when people saw this, they believed that the Haman was on the top of the horse and Mordechai was the one leading the horse. So the daughter of Haman wanted to be funny, and she threw something unpleasant to her father and hit him on the face. And he lifted his head and he sees that his daughter is the one that threw this bag of unpleasant stuff to his face. Don't ask what happened to her. She didn't live past this incident more than 2 minutes. She jumped from the tower to the ground. And now Haman realized that his end was near. Now that Ahashverosh and Haman are not longer happy, now they are the opposite. They are sad. At that moment, Mordechai and Esther have the power to activate the mercy from Shamayim for the salvation of the Jewish people. That's what the Behind Palachi says in one sentence. Increase the happiness and mitigate sadness. Because sadness becomes an agent of the Yetzer Hara to make the person feel down. That's the meaning of when sometimes people say, I'm feeling down. What does it mean down? Depressed, sad. And the Gemara writes, Ena shechira shora lo mitoch atzbut, ela mitoch simcha. Godliness dwells when there is happiness. You know, there is a story in the Gemara about maybe Mor Ukba and Eliyahu Navi. And in one of his meetings with Eliyahu Navi, he asks him, tell me, who from my city will be a candidate for Olam Haba? He says, come tomorrow, let's meet in the flea market. Now, can you imagine seeing Eliyahu Navi and one of the greatest rabbis of the Talmud in the market, in the flea market? No, nothing wrong with the flea market. Always you get good bargains and good deals usually, right? Not anymore? Okay. Anyways, in the olden days for sure. Haven't been in one in many years. Anyways, so they go to the flea market and now they ask, okay, who is going to Olam Haba? He says, do you see these two people at the end of the aisle? they are candidates to Olam Haba. He goes to them and asks them, what do you do for a living? He says, we are comedians. What does it mean in comedians? Yes, we walk around the town. Whenever we see people with a long face, like Tisha B'Av, they feel sad, they look down. We give them words to lift the spirit. In other words, we bring happiness to the life, and that happiness resets the button of the neshama of the person, and that gives the person an opportunity to restart their day or to restart their life. It goes further and it says that, needless to say, that how careful this topic is on how the person speaks and how the person feels. This is something that is not limited to the time of the Shovavim, of this 6 weeks period. The mem of Shovavim is the mem of this week's Perashah, Perashah Mishpatim. The shin of Shovavim was Shemot. Every letter belongs to the next Perashah, and the last letter of the word Shovavim is for the first letter of this week's Perashah, Perashah Mishpatim, which is actually the Perashah that begins with a very large amount of mitzvot, related mostly Ben Adam LaHavero, interpersonal mitzvot, loss of employees, loss of slaves, loss of the land of Israel, etc. But it says this is something to be utilized throughout the year. Why? I guarantee you that if a person, let's talk about now on a simple level of marriage, okay? Of marriage, or the world of business. Remember the famous Pele Yoez that we learned a while back, that it says, part of your requirement in the world of business is how you treat your employees. And the treatment of the employees, he says, is not limited only to pay salaries on time. That's a given. It's actually a pasuk in the Torah. Beyomo titen secharo. It's a pasuk in the Torah that you need to pay your salaries on time. Whatever day agreement you have. Some people get paid once a week. Some people bi-weekly. Some people daily. Some people monthly. It doesn't matter the frequency. The matter is that whatever agreement you make with the employee, you are fulfilling your obligation from the Torah. And the Zohar supplements this. I said this maybe 2 weeks ago, but I'll give you the short version. The Zohar Kadosh writes that when employers pay their employees on time, they get an added beracha of being responsible for the shalom bayit of the employee with his wife and children at home. It's an unbelievable concept. You suddenly pay a salary and you think, I'm doing my duty, I'm doing my obligation, but Shamayim gives you bonus points. Why? Because by you paying the salary on time, you were able to give him the opportunity that when his wife needs to go buy grocery or do whatever she needs to do for the home, he has the means to provide for them. So you are a partner, this is what Kadosh writes, in their shalom bayit. Can you imagine? You pay the salary and now you're responsible for the shalom bayit. But the Zohar says the opposite too. If a person has the means and doesn't pay, you like to keep the money in your pocket one more weekend. And instead of paying him on Thursday, you say, I'll pay you on Monday. And you have the means. And you don't pay. It's a pasuk. Batya leshalemo is another avon. Don't be late in paying. Also when you make promises, especially to the synagogue. The faster you do it, the faster you pay, the better. Continuously behind Palachi, and it says, Don't minimize. We almost done because I have a Spanish class in a few minutes. It says, don't minimize the value of simpler mitzvot. Even the simple mitzvah, like kissing the mezuzah. I'm not sure if it's an obligation to kiss the mezuzah, but I'll tell you what the halakha writes. 2 words, hibub mitzvah. You show the love for the mitzvah. When you go in, you kiss the mezuzah. What you are saying, you are acknowledging God's presence, like you kiss the sisit in the Shema. You kiss the sisit in the Baruch She'amar. You look at the Sefer with your eye, correct? You give tzedakah with your right hand. What, you're telling me that if you give it with the left hand, it's no mitzvah? Of course it's a mitzvah. But there are ways of how to do the mitzvah. There are protocols of how to do the mitzvah. The result is the same, that you gave tzedakah. But if you do it with the right hand, it's a better mitzvah. It's like to hold the kiddush cup. You leave the kiddush cup on Shabbat, you do it with your right hand. Even you're lefty. And one of the reasons why the right...
Even if you're lefty.
Yes, of course, I'm lefty.
And so you hold it even you're
Right, because the right is always representative of the midah of Hesed, of the attribute of kindness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Mimino esh dat lamo, Yemin Hashem romema, Yemin Hashem osa hayil.
Yemin Moshe.
Yemin Moshe is a street in Israel, I believe. Now, right?
I lived there for 2 months.
Okay, very nice. Anyways, no, maybe it was somebody special, but it's a street for sure. So what we are saying from this Pesukim, that the right has always the upper hand over the left. That's why, interesting enough, in the dress code of men and the dress code of ladies, you see this. The men's shirt are left to right. The ladies' shirt are right to left. In the Hasidic garment industry, the shirt for men are right to left.
Like ladies.
Like ladies.
Why?
Because it's midat rahamim.
Or right on top of left.
Yes, that's why the Ben Ish Chai writes, when you pray, you put the right over the left.
So
The Hesed,
I'm going to throw all my shirts then.
you know, the Mishnah writes, Al tehi hasid arbe. Don't be such a pious. When all your shirts become white, then you can think about it. You're not there yet. You're still dressing multicolored shirts. So don't change. I don't want issues with your wife. I don't want issues of your shalom bayit. You don't have to change. But I'm only creating this as an awareness to understand that the right hand always has the upper hand. The rahamim, midah of rahamim versus din. That's why we don't cross the fingers. We don't do this. Why not? Although many people do it, but you should not do this. Because then you're blending the rahamim with din. And I don't want the hesed and din mixed. I want hesed to have the full cover, the full upper hand of the person. Okay?
So why do you put water in the kiddush cup?
That's a whole different show. Maybe tomorrow or Friday, remind me, I'll talk about it.
That's next month.
No, it's asking the connection between the water and the wine on Shabbat. Right. There are reasons, but one of the reasons is that the water is hesed, is kindness, and the wine is din. So you mitigate the din of the wine by diluting it with water. But there is a much deeper explanation. Belly nether, remind me on Friday, belly nether, and time allowing, I may devote a few minutes to this topic. So, Be'ezat Hashem, Yiratzon, that the words of Torah of today gives an aliyah neshama to all the names that we mentioned, and the Fuah Shelema as well to the name that we mentioned before. We're going to say Kaddish, and we're going to say Eshkava right after Kaddish. ברוך אדוני לעולם, אמן ואמן. רבי חנניה בן הקשיא אומר, רצה הקדוש ברוך הוא לזכות את ישראל לפיכך, חירבה להם תורה מצוות שנאמר, אדוני חפש למען צדקו, יגדיל תורה וידיר, קדיש. אמן. אמן. אשת חיל מיוסה ברחום בני מקרא, המנחם הכל בריאותיו ויחוז לרחם הנפש